Good morning. It's great to see everybody here today. If you're visiting with us, you are our honored guest, and we're so pleased that you have chosen to be with us today. We're going to talk about Samson this morning. One of the suggestions that I've received from the elders and in the suggestion box is let's do some case studies on some Bible characters. So we're gonna start trying to interject these, and we're gonna this morning do a case study on Samson because looking at some of these Old Testament characters can be very, very interesting, very instructive for us today. And Samson is a very interesting character. So this morning we're going to be in the book of Judges. If you would like to flip over there with me today. The story of Samson actually is the longest story of a judge that we get out of that book. It goes from Judges chapter 14 all the way through Judges 16. So we're going to be kind of going through that. I'm not going to sit up here and read to you Judges 14 through 16, although you've known me long enough, you know I would do something like that. But we're not going to do that this morning. We're just going to kind of have to weave through the story of Samson. But before we do that, I got a question. It's getting to that time of year. How many hardcore football fans do we have in here? I'm not going to insult you. I'm throwing that out. I'm looking for an honest answer because there's going to be a memory quiz up here. How many hardcore football fans we got in here, George? All right. Okay, Dallas Cowboy fans. Now, okay, let me ask you something. Do you remember this? Oh, wow. There not only was there a button, that wasn't a yes. Did you notice the yes? Pitch speaks. All right. And so it was yes. And then I looked at Tim and I saw Joe and it was like this. If you don't know what this is, I couldn't even tell. I'm not a football fan, so I can't even tell you the year. But this is Terrell Owens back when he played for the 49ers. And there was a game several years ago in which the 49ers were playing at Texas Stadium. See, I don't even think it was the new place. I think it was the old place. Yeah, it was at Texas Stadium. And a couple of times, Terrell Owens scored a touchdown. And what he did immediately, if you can imagine the Dallas Cowboys football field, he scores a touchdown. I was living in Dallas, I think, at the time, so they replayed this all the time on the news. He got the ball and he ran to the middle star, not the end zone. He didn't stay there. He ran to the star on the 50-yard line and celebrated. Oh. Yeah. And I tell you what, they got tired of it. I mean, he was looking to do that every single time he scored a touchdown. So when he did, the Cowboys were ready. They started smacking him in the star. Talk to Tim and Joe. They got the story down. They can remind you of it. Anyway, that's Terrell Owens. And if you know football at all, I don't know football at all. I know who this guy is. He was a very prideful player. He had talent. He did have talent. But as time moved forward, it became more and more evident that he was absolute cancer or absolute poison to a locker room. And like I said, I'm not a football fan, but it annoyed me when Terrell Owens came to Dallas. They hired him after this. What are you thinking? But that's just the way it was. But do you know how he ended his career? Terrell Owens, after a few years, he played, I think, for like 15 years. At the end of it, he got hurt, and he had to have an ACL repair, and so he was a free agent. And so, I don't know if you can see the caption on this, he actually paid for his own free agent open workout that was televised to basically advertise his skills to all NFL teams to see if somebody would want to pick him up as a player. You know how many teams showed up? 0. It's not because he was just old. It's because nobody wanted him. Nobody wanted to deal with the drama. Nobody wanted to have the poison in the locker room. Nobody wanted to deal with the mess that came with hiring T.O. He was a super talented athlete. He had skills. But his pride, his ego, his mouth cost him being able to play anymore at the end of it. His personal weaknesses stopped him from being able to be more than he was. I'll never forget it when he was playing with the Eagles. Again, this is something that they filmed and they kept showing repeatedly. He was chewing out McNabb, the quarterback from the Eagles, and just mouthing him relentlessly. And McNabb, being the class guy he is, he just took it. But he was his own worst enemy. And he did great things. He had some success. But his own weaknesses stopped him from being more. Let's talk about Samson. Samson is the strong man of the Bible. Again, if you have never read the story of Samson, I encourage you to do so. I tell you what, the book of Judges is awesome for preteen and down boys. There's a lot of action in the book of Judges. And in the story of Samson, you get a lot of action. He's a strong man. He had these great feats of strength. And here's a list of some of his accomplishments. He kills single-handedly 30 Philistine men, strips them dead, and takes the garments back to his wedding that he left to pay off the debt. The story of the 300 foxes. This is awesome. He was supposed to get married. But there was a snafu with a riddle, and the Philistines double-crossed him, and so he goes out and he kills the 30 guys to pay off the debt. While he's gone, his future father-in-law thinks Samson's mad at his daughter, so he marries her off to one of the other guests at the wedding. Let that sink in a little bit. Women, you're at your wedding, the groom's a little late. Your dad says, "Forget this, I'm marrying you to the best man." Yeah, okay. Samson comes back, cools down, and he tries to go see his wife, to what he thought was going to be his wife, to which the dad says, "No, I married her to somebody else." Out of anger, he captures 300 foxes, ties their tails together with a rope and a torch, and then turns the 150, crazy math skills, 150 groups loose in the standing grain of the Philistines. And it burns down. He single-handedly slaughters many Philistines after that when they attack again. He's then captured by his own people, and they want to turn Samson over because he's become a problem for the Israelites, because the Philistines, who are in power at the time, they're mad at Samson, ergo they're mad at all the Israelites. So the Israelites capture him, and they tie ropes around him, and he snaps the ropes, picks up this donkey jawbone, and he slaughters a couple of thousand of them. He spends the night, remember, man of God, spends the night with the Philistine prostitute. The Philistines gather around him, lock down the city. He wakes up in the middle of the night, breaks the city walls, the city gate down, and then carries it up a hill. We'll talk about Samson and Delilah later, and then the ultimate pulling down of the supporting pillars, which kills him and many Philistines. He had great, again, it would make a great movie. The story of Samson. There's a lot of visual, there's a lot of exploits of his strength, but he was his own worst enemy. It's a cool story to read, but the truth is that he was his own worst enemy. There were some things in his life that he just could not keep straight. And the sad thing about Samson as a judge of Israel, because again, he's found in the book of Judges, he had all the potential in the world. He's the only judge that God blessed with the whole strength thing. And everything that he had going for him, the fact is that he actually accomplished less as a judge than the other major judges that we read about in the book of Judges. He does less. Why? Because he was his own worst enemy. Uh-oh. Well, I guess slideshow's over for y'all. Okay. Now you got to use your mind's eye. In case you want a copy of my notes, let me know. I'll give you one. Let's talk about some failures of Samson. Let's talk about his pride. Samson was controlled by his pride. Now, don't think, if we think of super strong guys, we sometimes think of muscle heads, people who have a lot here but not a lot here. This stuff. Samson was actually a smart guy. Again, he's able to come up with riddles. He does tongue-in-cheek stuff. He does wordplay. He had some intelligence about himself, but he was controlled by his pride. His pride is strength, but also then the pride of his intellect. In Judges chapter 14 and verse 12. Judges 14 and verse 12. This is the account of Samson and the riddle. Samson on the way to his wedding is attacked by a lion. Yeah, you heard me. He's on his way down, and he's attacked by a lion, which the Bible tells us he rips apart this lion like somebody would rip apart a young goat. Okay, it was like, what does that mean? Well, consider this. He ripped apart that lion like we would rip apart fried chicken. Guess what you're probably not eating for lunch this afternoon? So out of this, he comes up with a riddle. And at this wedding, he shares this riddle, a riddling game. And he says, if you can answer this riddle, I'll give you 30 sets of clothes. This is where the killing of the 30 guys came in, by the way. And so he comes up with this riddle. Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. Because after he killed that lion, he comes back by it. There's a beehive in the middle of the lion, which he takes some of the honey out of a dead lion and then he eats it. Out of a dead lion and he eats it. Yeah. Okay, just make sure you caught that. And then he shares it with his parents. Doesn't tell them where he gets it from. Shares it with his parents. But out of frustration, the people can't answer the riddle, and so they go and they threaten his new bride. He threatens his new bride that... that's already on. He threatens the new bride that if you do not give us the answer to this riddle, we're going to kill you and your family. But it was great pride. He thought he could outsmart everybody. And it ended up being his own doing. Vengeance. So much of the story of Samson and the Philistines is based on one-upmanship. That's it. Consider Judges chapter 15, verse 3. Samson said to them, "This time I have a right to get even with the Philistines." Look at then verse 10. Verse 7. Samson said to them, "Since you've acted like this, I won't stop until I get my revenge on you." Verse 10. The men of Judah asked, "Why have you come to fight us?" "We have come to take Samson prisoner," they answered, "to do to him as he did to us." And verse 11. It says, "Don't you realize that the Philistines are ruler over us? What have you done to us?" He answered, "I merely did to them what they did to me." Are you sensing a theme? And then in his final prayer, in chapter 16 and verse 28, it says, "Then Samson prayed to the Lord." Now, he's going to pray. We have two recorded prayers of Samson. This is the last one that he prays right before he dies. And this is it. "O sovereign Lord, remember me. O God, please strengthen me just once more and let me, with one blow, get revenge on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. Let me kill them and me because they blinded me." Everything about this fight between Samson and the Philistines was based on revenge. It was based on vengeance, one-upmanship. They did this to me, so I'm going to do this to them, and back and forth. Eye for an eye and tooth for a tooth, or as they say in Fiddler on the Roof, "Oh, that's wonderful. Then the whole world will be blind and toothless." This is the nature of that relationship. He was geared towards pride, and he was geared towards vengeance. But let's not forget the breaking of the Nazirite vow, which was read earlier. There was some things that a Nazirite could not do. To be a Nazirite means that you were set apart for a period of time. As Phil said earlier, you were set apart for this time of dedication. We could call that being holy. You were set apart for a period of holiness, that you were going to be dedicated to God. Now God deemed it, Samson didn't put this on himself, but God deemed it that he would be a Nazirite for life. Which means that you don't cut your hair, you stay away from everything having to do with grapes, from raisins to the skins to the seed. Stay away from all of it. Stay away from wine. Stay away from dead bodies, and also keeping to the law. Basically, you have to remain an element of cleanliness for the entire time of the vow. And a regular person who was not going to be a Nazirite for life, but just a Nazirite for a period of time, your hair was the symbol of the Nazirite vow. You let your hair grow for as long as the vow went. After your vow was over, you would take yourself, shave your hair, and then sacrifice your hair as one of the signs that your period of a Nazirite vow is now over. So this hair was very important. But Samson, again, he kills a lion, and then he goes back by it. He knows that there's honey in a lion. I am not an Old Testament scholar, but I do know this. I doubt it was clean behavior to eat something out of a dead animal. And then he goes and he shares it with his parents. Cleanliness, uncleanliness spread. And when he shared it with his parents, he shared the uncleanliness that he put upon himself with his own family. Then he goes and he seeks a wife from the Philistines. Now the Bible tells us that God was using this in order to start the strife between Samson and the Philistines. God used Samson's weaknesses in order to bring about His will. But then later we read about how he's wanting to spend the night with a Philistine prostitute, and then he goes and falls in love with Delilah. Which brings us to another one of Samson's weaknesses. He had a problem with the women. Women were in fact Samson's kryptonite. Superman's enemy? A rock. Samson's enemy? Females. And his inability to control himself around. Twice in the story of Samson, Samson is put into a position and divulges information that he should not have because a woman was crying and nagging at him. That's it. He couldn't take it anymore. I mean, if you don't believe me, that's fine. Flip over to Judges, chapter 14. Verse 16, this is the fourth day of that riddle bet that we've been talking about. And after her family has been threatened. In verse 16 it tells us, then Samson's wife threw herself on him sobbing, "You hate me. You don't really love me. You've given my people a riddle and you haven't told me the answer." He says, "I haven't even explained it to my father or mother." Why? Because then they would be unclean. He explains, "So why should I explain it to you?" So she cried the whole 7 days of the feast. So on the seventh day he finally told her, because she continued to press him. She in turn explained the riddle to his people. Now, flip over to 16. Come over to 16, and in verse 15, this is part of the Samson and Delilah's account. And we'll talk about them in a minute, but just know that he's been playing with her. He's been taunting with her. She keeps asking, "Why are you so strong?" And he's come up with 3 different stories of why he's strong. They're all lies. Because she's been paid off to find out the source of Samson's strength. He's lying with her. He's taunting her. He's toying with her. He has a creative mind. He does. But then the kryptonite comes out. In verse 15 it says, "Then she said to him, 'How can you say I love you? We have had a wonderful week together. How can you say I love you when you won't confide in me? This is the 3rd time you have made a fool of me and haven't told me the secret of your great strength.' With such nagging," that's biblical, "with such nagging she prodded him day after day until he was tired to death." That's it. He kept talking to her and he got tired. He was tired to death and he says, "Fine, I will tell you. No razor has ever been used on my head," he said, "because I have been a Nazirite set apart to God since birth. If my head were shaved, my strength would leave me and I would become as weak as any other man." That's why. Because he couldn't handle her talking to him. Guys, if you try to use that on your wives, you're just treating me like Samson. I bear no responsibility. Okay, another interesting verse. It also talks about the failure of Samson. You flip over to chapter 15, verse 20. This is the last verse in this chapter. It says, Samson led Israel for 20 years in the days of the Philistines. And then we have chapter 16, which talks about Samson and Delilah, the death of Samson, and also the fact that the Philistines were still in power. Now, if you just read Samson, we would think that's very normal. But the thing is that it's not. Samson ruled, or was a judge for Israel for 20 years, and the Philistines are still there? What? Are you kidding me? You go back and read about the other major judges. And when I say major judges, I'm talking about those accounts of the judges in which we have a long account about. Because every now and then you get this, 2-verse account of a judge, and you really don't get any story. But, stories like Deborah and Gideon and Ehud and Jephthah and Samson. These are the major judges in which we get actually a sizable account. And the other ones outside of Samson, they have a similar element in common. A judge is chosen. That judge goes out and either strikes an initial blow themselves or from the beginning gathers an army of fellow Israelites. They then go to war against the invading horde. The invading horde is defeated and they're sent away licking their wounds, and in some cases we don't really hear from them anymore. They're not a threat. Then there's Samson, dealing with the Philistines. Samson operates single-handedly. There's no evidence in the story of Samson that he ever tried to unite his people against the invading horde. There's no battle, some great showdown battle between the forces of God and the Philistines, outside of when Samson dies. And for the Philistines, they are able to remain to be a thorn in the side of Israel all the way until the days of David. So for 20 years, Samson ran across the countryside doing what he wanted to do, and he didn't stop anything. He had all the potential in the world to be great. And he was great. He's in Hebrews 11. He did some great things. But he could have been so much more if he was dedicated and if he was humble. Okay, let's talk about Samson and Delilah. Again, as we talked about, Samson was proud. He was arrogant. He also had a quick mind. Here comes Delilah. He falls in love with her. And while he's falling in love with her, she's busy selling his hide to the Philistines. Give me a sum of money and I will find out the source of his strength and let you know what it is. She asked, what makes you so strong? 3 times he comes up with the story. And isn't it interesting? Again, Samson's not a simpleton. He was arrogant. And as we know, with pride comes fall. But put yourself in Samson's shoes. And take the Bible for what it is. And let the account flow. Verse 6 of chapter 16. So Delilah said to Samson, tell me the secret of your great strength and how you can be tied up and subdued. What an interesting question, first of all, from the woman that I love. Beloved. I can't even do it with a straight face. Beloved, how may I subdue you? First question would be, why? Samson answered her, if anyone ties me with 7 fresh thongs, they have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man. Then the rulers of the Philistines brought her 7 fresh thongs that had not been dried, and she tied him with them, with men hidden in the room. She called to Samson, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. But he snapped the thongs as easily as pieces of string snaps when it comes close to a flame, so the secret of his strength was not discovered. Then Delilah said to Samson, you have made a fool of me. You lied to me. Come now, tell me how you can be tied. He said, if anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man. So Delilah took new ropes and tied him with them. Then with men hidden in the room, she called to him, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. But he snapped the ropes off his arm as easily if they were thread. Delilah then said to Samson, until now you have been making a fool of me and lying to me. Tell me how you can be tied. He replied, if you weave the 7 braids of my head, remember he hasn't had a haircut, into the fabric on the loom and tighten it with a pin, I'll become as weak as any other man. So while he was sleeping, Delilah took the 7 braids of his head, wove them into a fabric, and tightened it with a pin. Again she called to him, Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He awoke from his sleep and pulled up the pin and the loom and the fabric. Then she said to them, how can you say I love you? Okay, there we go. Does this bother you? Is it just me? Samson, tell me how you can be subdued. I'll tell you. Comes up with a cockamamie story. She goes out, oh, Samson, you can be tied with 7 fresh thongs that have never been used. Oh, look what I got in the cupboard. Ties him up. And then there's other Philistine guys in her back room. And when she says, Samson, the Philistines are upon you, gets up, bursts him, cleans house, and then next day does this over again. 3 times. Is he not paying attention? Would you not have questions if he told your beloved the secret to your strength? And lo and behold, she has it. And lo and behold, your greatest enemies are in his house. Or in her house. And then after you clean house, she comes to you and says, you're making a fool of me. What is going on? He's arrogant. He's playing. And he does not take serious the danger that he's actually in. Which breaks our heart more when he finally does tell the secret, and I put that in quotation marks, of his strength. Because he knew what she was doing. What was he thinking about? He's dabbled with sin all of his life. And he lost the respect, the damage that sin can cause. And in the end, he got caught. He did not take seriously the lifestyle, the vows, his responsibility. And in the end, he got caught. This brings us to the top mistake of Samson. Top mistake of Samson. Samson was strong because of his... Samson was strong because of his... No! Samson was strong because of... Yes! See, that's one of those things. Samson says... if you look at what Samson told Delilah, the first part of it was... No razor has ever been used on my head. And this is where the temptation is to stop. Oh, it's because of his long hair. Goodness sakes, how many of us... I used to have more hair than this. But I don't think I ever got great strength from hair. It wasn't about his follicles. It was about what his follicles represented. If you go on reading, Samson missed it, but then some of it he did get right. Because I had been a Nazirite set apart to God since birth, if my head were shaved, my strength would leave me. The hair, remember what the hair is. The hair is the sign. The hair is the source of the Nazirite vow. That's the clock. How long you've been a Nazirite is marked by how long your hair becomes. And up to this point, he's broken many elements of the Nazirite vow until that last one. The God had made Samson strong. I mean, the Bible tells us in Judges chapter 14:6, verse 19, also in chapter 15, verse 14, the Lord came upon him in power. It wasn't about the hair in and of itself. He was able to be strong because the Lord came upon him in power. And then with that final prayer, he asked God to strengthen him one last time to be able to pull the pillars down. It was God who made him strong. But if you've been in a situation to have great strength all of your life. You've been able to rip down city gates and cart them up a hill as easily as we carry groceries into a house. Again, the temptation to be cocky comes into our head, and all of a sudden we think, I am the great one that God has chosen. I can get out of any situation. I can get out of all trouble. And then we fall. The cutting of the hair was a straw that broke the camel's back, because after that he was really, on all intents and purposes now, no longer a Nazirite. No longer set before God, because that's what the Nazirite did at the end of the vow. He was able to be captured. His eyes were plucked out. He was led to tread grain. On the last day of his life, the Philistines are celebrating. This is public enemy number one. We're celebrating this. They go and they have this great big celebration before their god Dagon. And they say, bring Samson out to entertain us. What kind of was Samson sing and dance? No, they want to see the blind man stumble over himself. That's what they want to see. They want to see him brought low. To which Samson prays to be strengthened one more time, to be able to pull down pillars, to get away, and to die with the Philistines. It's a sad story. It really is. Because of the potential. Did Samson do some great things? Did he kill a lot of Philistines? Yeah, in fact, he killed more at his death than the Bible tells us than he ever did in life. But they were still there. They were still there, and they were still able to cause trouble. And again, David had to deal with them. David was a few generations after Samson. We have the potential for greatness. We do. Christians in the valley, we have great potential and opportunity for greatness. But potential will only get us so far. What we also need is dedication and humility. Samson had the tools and the initial talents, but what he didn't have was the dedication and the humility. And this is what brought him down. Thank you. In Proverbs 11:2, this proverb says, when pride comes, then comes disgrace. But with humility comes wisdom. I pray that us, as the believers of God in the Rio Grande Valley, that we just don't rely on our own potential, that we just don't rely on our own talent, but that we seek humility and dedication and wisdom. So then we're not just good. We might have some things going for us, so that we may truly be spiritually extraordinary. This is what God wants from us. It won't happen unless we dedicate ourselves to Him. This morning, I don't know where you are in life. Maybe you have tried to go and do life on your own terms, completely on your own, and have fallen. I know it's not too late to come back. It's not too late. Every minute, every second of every day is an opportunity to change our direction, change our story. And if we have left God, every second of every day is an opportunity to come back to Him. Maybe you haven't given yourself to Christ. Maybe you haven't joined Him in the death in the waters of baptism to arise in new life as a new creature. Freed from the old life, freed from the sin of your past life. Being able to walk with Him for the rest of your life. We would love to encourage you and assist you in your baptism today, if that is your wish. But whatever needs you have, would you please come down as we stand and as we sing.